Thanks, everybody, for joining me. Answering the call, a digital learning transformation using model-based testing. So I am Greg Seipel. I am the VP of Quality Assurance at Everfi. I've been at Everfi roughly about 15 months now. And so they brought me in to really help them in this digital transformation from manual testing to automation. And it's hard to believe it's already been like 15 months since I've been here. And we've been doing some amazing things in the last 15 months. And in the last 6 months, you're going to kind of learn about Everfi and how we're trying to build course automation around, model-based testing. But if you in the future want to follow me, there's my LinkedIn down at the bottom, Twitter, and then also my GitHub page. So you want to learn something more about all my other previous talks or some blogs I've written in the past. There it is. So what are you really going to learn here today during this particular session? Well, you're going to learn how Everfi is really committed of answering, it from an educational course side of things. We're really tackling some really difficult topics out there in the world and how we're trying to make, everybody a better citizen around understanding some of these topics. But we're also trying to, you're going to understand how we're energizing a positive change with quality engineering and how we're trying to build model-based testing into this based on all of our courses out there today. So we're going to jump into just a little clip around Everfi and learn what we're going to do and how we're trying to do it with quality engineering itself.
We can all hear it. It's steady, loud, insistent. It reverberates in headlines, and it finds us marching. This demand for change, this certainty that things can be better, that racism and economic inequality are our problem to solve, not our forever fate. But we were not born knowing how to fix the world. And there are classes that core doesn't cover. At Everfi, we are building the curriculum for a better, more just tomorrow. Practical courses to educate the whole citizen on financial literacy, diversity, equity, and inclusion, mental health, and compassion. We have, all of us, heard the call. And we can, all of us, answer it.
I hope that video really, motivates you and energizes you, because Everfi is really committed to answering that call, from actually educating everybody with their courses. But we're here also to energize this positive change around quality engineering. And how does that really, kind of play a part of this whole conversation, around model-based testing? Everfi has over 12 different social impact indexes, which is over 100 plus courses. So now just think about all these courses around diversity, inclusion, next generation skills, digital awareness. But these courses, if you're traditionally testing these, could be really challenging because we're talking about a lot of manpower. It doesn't really scale, and it doesn't even really scale with your traditional automation. So what we're going to kind of do is going to describe those testing problems that we're walking through and how we're trying to solve that and go through those today. The traditional testing methods today is, you have manual testing, maybe some exploratory, and your traditional kind of front-end automation. It could be Selenium, it could be Cypress. There's a lot of cool tools out there to get you to that piece. But the problem with a lot of this, when you have a system is maybe complex, like our courses have a lot of sections, a lot of pages, a lot of permutations. When I say permutations throughout this presentation, it's about different learner paths, right? There's various networks, there's, different user personas, right? And we're trying to solve that problem today to where we feel like we're building better quality into our courses, because it's very important to us that we're trying to make a change in the world with our educational courses to make sure that you're getting the highest quality course out there today, right? And I want to solve the problem where we're kind of out of sync. What I observed in the last, 4 to 5 months of how we're trying to improve this process of building a better relationship with, the product managers to the developers in the QA team. We're kind of coming together, right? And we're also kind of trying to take this front-end testing mentality that it's fragile. Model-based testing can still be somewhat fragile, but it's going to kind of break things down into small, manageable components. It allows us to actually make test changes much faster and regenerate those tests later. And, like I said, the course components, our courses are made up of this set of course components that are reusable and everything, but they break. And so we need to test those more frequently in the best way. And I think another thing we're going to kind of talk about this problem is quality just doesn't scale right now. We're going to be able to scale it for this whole conversation. And we're going to kind of remove that part of QA being the afterthought and, where there was no buy-in. We're trying to really be in the trenches from day one and how we're building better quality into our courses. So I think it's important to understand the technologies that are driving this learning transformation here at Everfi. We're changing it from manual testing to model-based type of testing. Our foundation came that we wanted to approach it from a model-based testing standpoint. I bring experience, and some of my team that joined me this year have experience around model-based testing. Our courses are made of reusable components, web components itself. We want to model those components like the functions, the pages, the learner flows, or as we would call it, the learner flow, right? As a learner coming into it. And after you model out the whole entire system, we need to kind of put these together from an actual visual standpoint of a flowchart, as you'll learn later in this presentation, of like, how do I generate these tests rather than writing tests, right? And then when we're generating these tests through algorithms, we're using this code template that basically is filling out the test to create this kind of like test script artifact. And our artifact is Cypress. We've been doing Cypress for about 12 months so far, but 6 months has been around model-based testing. We're able to generate tests from the test modeler side, from their UI, but we've also built an API to where we can call that API and generate those tests from our skeleton and have that code to where we can run it locally or even in a CI execution. And the great thing about Cypress, it has a great dashboard. It allows you to kind of know the health of your project in this whole thing, right? And it has a lot of great integrations from GitHub and also even Slack integrations itself. But we have to take it a step further because Cypress is only really covering our learner flows, right? We need to understand how our learners are actually seeing our courses out there today, right? We need to know the source of truth by taking visual assertions of every single page of our course as we're going through that. How's the learner experience on a desktop or even a device itself, right? And that's getting that resolution, verification in there and using the ultra fast grid to really get results really fast and not be the bottleneck around this continuous testing piece of things. And then you kind of bring all these technologies together. It's important to do continuous testing with, CI tools. We're using CircleCI in a couple ways to do the whole build process and testing of things, but it's also our testing grid for those learner flows because Cypress integrates easily into CircleCI. We're building up our testing grid from there, running our tests, and then pushing all of our, visual test over to Applitools to make sure that we understand we're building the right level of testing into this. So this is the technologies, and I think this will help you understand as I go into deeper into model-based testing here in a second. So we're trying to build for the future. Model-based testing is not really new, but it's kind of new to the testing, community itself. Why would I want to generate tests from that, right? Well, from my mindset, it's easier to develop and maintain when you have this one-to-one relationship of a model to a web component. What is a web component? It's a React component, an Angular component, and it's broken down into a very small modular piece of code, like a carousel, or like maybe it's a, slideshow or something like that, right? But, with model-based testing, where it comes into play, you all have done this if you've done automation. Test code from test to test is very similar. You're repeating and copying things over and over. You might be calling an actual reusable action or pay object or something like that. What we're trying to do is we're modeling the things that go into your hooks, like your before each and your after hooks, or a collection of reusable functions, right? We model at one time, and then we allow us to generate the tests we need for that permutation itself, right? And we'll go a little deeper into that. But it also gives great visibility and to increase quality coverage. And there's a lot of great things around model-based testing, and I cannot cover that in the 30 minutes I'm going to be here today, right? So I'm going to try to make sure that we're understanding the things that, the basics around model-based testing. I would take, if you want to learn more about it, you can also reach out to me or just do some reading on it. So let's take it down to the modeling of a course. We have a carousel. And as you see here on the right-hand side, this is a mock-up of a carousel on a mobile device. And I'm using it because it can scale on this page really nicely, right? As a learner and you come in and you're on this particular page, I need to physically click on every right arrow of the carousel. And I get the last part of the carousel, then the next button would be enabled for you so you can go to the next page of our course, right? Well, for us, we need to create a model of that. And you see the code in here, and we can determine based on how many dots are on the page, how many times we've got to go through it. But the other thing we're doing is we're also modeling the part of taking a snapshot of this page, the known state of this page as we get onto it before we actually hit that next button, right? So we're taking that visual assertion with AppleTools itself. And every time we hit the next button in this carousel, we're taking a screenshot. We're seeing exactly what the user is seeing from that standpoint. And this allows us to reuse this on various pages, and you'll learn how as you model these things out. AppleTools, a very snippet of code, right? If we want to enable AppleTools, we can actually pass a parameter through our CI options, and you can take a screenshot. If we just want to do the learner flow itself, we don't have to generate the AppleTools piece of our code. And then another very basic example where everybody knows, you go out and get a selector and you click it, right? These are some very simple components. I want to kind of give you some visualization of what you saw here on the right of this screenshot. When you get to a carousel, you have to get through the carousel and hit the next button. But I want to build off of that, right? You see here on the left of this diagram, these are components basically of a carousel. Choose an answer, and button, accordion, AppleTools. We have 79 other components, and it just really depends on the course that you're kind of like going through at that point, right? So using a test engine, and it knows how to orchestrate the test generation sequence. If you look at the top example, page 1, it has a choose answer. We can drag that in and generate that test really simple. And then it has AppleTools, and it hits the next button and goes to the next page. We're generating all the code through page 1 through page 5, but it's interchangeable. So anything ever changes with carousel, we make that change, the one arrow on the left, and then we regenerate that test. And we don't have to go update a ton of tests or various things. It's easy to maintain from that standpoint. So that kind of gives you the basics around how you've got some models and how we generate the test sequences, but that's just one flow, right? Now let's take it a step further. So we have Everfi, and this is a lot on this page, but I want to give you that visualization around where model-based testing really comes into play of combinations of data, right? So at the very bottom, there's a ledger called your network, your learner, and your location. For us, that's how our combinations work for courses. But for you, it may be something a little different. And those combinations or permutations will be a little different. But I want to let you understand it starts at the network itself. You have a corporation, you have higher ed, right? Well, right now, that one course has got 2 networks. Well, that's 2 permutations already. And then you go to the next level of the actual learner. You have a non-supervisor and a supervisor. So now you compound that by 2 more. And then you got locations. Locations based on, as a learner, may see a different experience if they're in California, or if they're in Illinois, they may see different experiences of different pages through that journey, right? As you see, there's an intro and it goes through all these modules and everything. What that really says is, you look at that, there's 12 learner journeys already from one course. Then you compound that by putting on a learning management system. We have our own platform that runs our courses, but some use third parties like SCORM and others out there, right, to run our courses to teach, your companies or the, students in your, higher ed or even lower K-12. Now you got to think about devices, right? Desktop and mobile. That's a total of 30 different permutations or combinations of this one course that could have different experiences. And what it does is, if you remember going back to that last slide, we model once, run through the test engine to run all these different permutations itself. So hopefully this builds some knowledge around model-based testing for you. But how's this all work, you may ask, right? Like with Test Modeler, one of the good things, based on my previous experience, this whole generation of code was typically just a bunch of code that basically mapped all the models together. But Test Modeler brings this kind of flowchart mentality to the mindset of like, we're going to start a course. We open up a URL and we get into page 1 of the course. We start it. We take a page check. With Applitools, we hit the next button, we're end, and we go to the next page. Very simplistic, right? What we're doing is we're dragging the models onto this flowchart, and then we run a test engine after it that basically generate our Cypress test for us. That's that carousel. Here's an example of the carousel in that flowchart. It gets to that page, and we're able to kind of build out this path of like what the experience you're going to have with a carousel itself. So what this also is providing us as a tester is we can give these visualization flowcharts not to us, to developers, product managers, or others, as saying this is how we're testing a course or your application, right? Visually, and we're using this to generate our test. How does this magic all work, right? So I got a video here, and I'm going to try to walk through this a little bit for you. And so starting this video, I'm going to kind of wipe out the changes here where I generated some tests here. So very simplistic. I'm just going to delete what you see the test here on the very far left here. We're going to delete those. And now what we're going to do is you'll see the folder is empty. And up here, we want to regenerate the test, maybe because we create a new model or updated a model. We're going to regenerate these tests by running a simple command that's our API, talking to Test Modeler, and running through their algorithms to generate those exact same tests, kind of what we saw there. And so when it gets done, it takes about 19 seconds to generate those Cypress tests again. It's a new, version of this particular test. You'll come over to the folder and it exists there today. Cool. So now you kind of understand that. So let's go a little deeper. What just happened? What did you just see? So starting on this slide of auto generation from those visual models on the left-hand side, we might have passed an option if we wanted to in there. Like I wanted Applitools, so I would want to pass true, right? So from that COI, you saw I wanted to generate a test. It communicated with Test Modeler. It understood exactly the project and what test to go generate, and it ran through their algorithms that then communicates with a test, like a code template. That code template is like how it's filling out that actual Cypress test for it and generates these test artifacts. Now that we had those test artifacts you saw there, now we could run those locally. But in this sense here, we can now have that CircleCI trigger those user flows of those particular tests itself. And as those tests are running on CircleCI, they're also sending our, visual assertions up to Applitools to replay on their visual grid and expand our coverage even more. So hopefully this gives you a visualization of how that last slide worked together and how we're actually generating those tests. Let's take it a little step further. We have other things on our roadmap. As we're building out these tests, we've talked about some basic stuff. It's the user flow, visual assertions. But when we go from page 1 to page 2, we want with Cypress, what we can do is we can intercept the API calls to ensure that we updated a progress record of that student, right? Saying, hey, they completed page 1. So if you ever left the course and came back in it, it knows exactly where you are in that course. The other thing we're trying to add in this year is performance using Lighthouse. Accessibility testing on each of our pages and our components using Axe Core in itself. And that's in flight, and we're hoping to start our Axe Core implementation of modeling roughly around in June and start working at that level and try to expand that a little bit more. So you understand how things are generated now and how it's executed and everything, but I want to just give you some snippets of how the code is generated. And I'm just going to give you some snippets because it generates a lot of code for those tests. But you can see here where it generated the module 1, of the preventing harassment and discrimination for Canada course, right, itself. It had the before and the after each, right? It created that. Then you got the it block itself. If you kind of start here at the top, you'll see it created this very generic it block. First step, it navigates to a course. I didn't give you exactly the, the HTML for that, but it goes to that particular course as a student. And then we, do our reading and we click next. We can take a screenshot. We upload it to Applitools and we hit the next button, right? And then we continue that same process going through. So it's taken that whole journey through that module 1. And that module could have a range of 5 to 20 or 30 pages on it, and it generates all that code into one it block for us as a learner itself. So you understand now we generated this code. Now we want to trigger on CircleCI in this continuous testing standpoint. So I want to kind of understand how we're doing this. You'll see how, in the sense of, like, if you've never had experience with Cypress's dashboard, right? We're executing this stuff in CircleCI, and I'm going to walk through this platform where it helps you to give you this visualization of how your tests are performing, and it'll help you triage these things much faster. So, information in here, you can see here, run status on this new course that we're developing, to the duration, where it takes roughly about 3 minutes and 44 seconds to run this right now. The size of the actual test suite itself. And if you had top failures, it would put those in here, but it's running clean. And most common errors and stuff like that. Flaky test. A flaky test it identifies if the test has passed a couple times, failed a couple times, passed. It's keeping track of all that. Here, I'm going to pause it for a second. You can see the whole total duration of the test. You can also, as it gives you the actual branch in GitHub. And then also you could click here and take you into CircleCI and actually see this whole thing execute. At the high level, you got the testing results of all the tests that were located, and the specs here, what all the machines that ran on CircleCI too. But in the overall, it will produce all this great information inside here to help you determine how the test is executing. So if you drill down into this test, they've also introduced this great integration with Jira also, where if there was a bug or a test case something, we could open that up and have traceability of the bugs to our actual test here too. It takes screenshots and videos when there's failures. We can also see the first time this test was introduced, if it was modified, we can see the history of it. What environments it's running in, from the artifacts, from logs as we click into this, how it ran on that actual CircleCI node itself also. You can see all kinds of great information inside here as I'm trying to figure out how to navigate through this a little bit. The history of this from GitHub. So we see the history on it. If there is failures or flakiness through the history of this, the performance from the hooks, how long this test is taking, so we can understand the health of is it scaling the way we want to? I'm going to go briefly in the test description, but all the code that's being generated is going to be here. I kind of pause it because it was showing some stuff I didn't want to show here. So I'm hoping this gives you some better understandings of how that looks. And the next phase after that's all executing is understanding some of the things that where Apple Tools is helping us in this generation piece here. So you can see in this execution, it's during the actual, the whole learner path. I'm going to navigate it down to the failures that I found while I was running this particular test. It was 25 failures. Out of 315 tests that executed. We're going to drill down into the mobile one here really quickly. And I'm going to kind of use their feature of like showing the diff here. And if I pause it really quickly on this right here, you'll see that the one image on the left is actually the baseline, the source of truth of this course in the mobile device. And the one on the right is the last execution. And as you see here, the button is enabled. We didn't do anything. That button should not be enabled. That is an actual physical bug that we caught using Apple Tools itself. So we're going to navigate and show you another example, just kind of briefly of how this is really helping us as we're doing all of our testing. Here's another example where there was a change made on this particular page. And you'll see here that they introduced a pause button on our listen side of things. And that helped us identify, was that expected change of that particular thing? All right, so that was a lot. I move very fast. Hopefully, I didn't lose anybody. But, at the beginning, we talked about some very basic things around our courses and everything, and where we was trying to make this, learner, transformation from manual to model-based testing. We are 100% exploratory testing on our courses when I first started this journey. And the thing about exploratory testing, it's not always guaranteed to have the right coverage, because you saw in that course, there was a lot of permutations, a lot of things that could go into the pages. We have 79 components, right? So a lot of things could really change with that. And here on the right, I'm going to give you some numbers, and this is a lot to take in. We're going to start kind of right here at the 75. On average, a course has over 70 plus pages of course. That's a lot of coverage, right? And then if you take it down a level from that, on average, a course could have around 12 permutations. So you start compounding that. That's not going to scale from a manual testing side. It may not even scale in your traditional automation standpoint, because if things are changing so much and you have to regenerate code, that helps you scale faster. So in the last 6 months, we've started this. We have pretty much modeled about 28 of our 79 course components. And that's based on the courses we're trying to automate right now, right? Which we have been able to generate over 8 courses out of 100 plus. We're targeting by the end of June to have 28. We're learning how to get faster at this. And I'm going to show you some of the things we're going to be working on in the next 6 months to improve the speed on this even faster. By the numbers, visual assertions itself, right? Every page is going to have that source of truth of what the learner actually sees from a desktop to mobile. That's really huge for us. Especially when it comes to, we know that it functionally works, but it's visually intact. And that's why it's so important for us to make sure that we have that in place. And I think as we go into model-based testing, you saw those visual flowcharts, right? You're going to see that we have 100% permutation coverage, which is huge, because before it was unknown. How fast is this stuff? These are some arbitrary numbers I kind of pulled together based on our experience, and we're getting faster and faster. It takes us about 60 minutes to really to speed up authoring an actual model itself, right? Up to about 4 hours or maybe a little bit more when you're authoring an actual permutation. When I say that permutation, that's really that learner journey through a course itself, right? Getting from module 1 to maybe module 5 and getting through those 75 pages, right? It's a lot of drag and drop and creating those flow charts and stuff. And I guess I'm saying things that we're really working on really will speed that up, that we think that will even come down even more. So what's next for us, right? I'm curious, always trying to drive change, always trying to innovate. If you ever follow me, I love, test generation. And one of the things that will really speed this process up for us even more is generating the course learner path. That path today is really that flow chart where, as a automation engineer or developer, they're dragging the models in and creating that learner path. We built, all of our courses are built from YAML files, and we're working really closely with my team and the Curiosity team to where we can generate that. And that's going to speed that process up even more, maybe 50 to 75%, where we can get that down in the hours itself. GitHub changes, triggering targeted change, right? From test generation, generating the right test based on a developer. So what we do is when we create a course, we use S3 as kind of our unit, storybook of the course itself. So if the developer had to make a change to a page 30, it would go generate that test for it, run the test, give them feedback really quickly. But it's the same thing with the course. Maybe we just need to go generate that part of the course and get it into a known state of that course and test it, not run the whole entire course, because even a whole entire course can take some time, right? You heard me talk about API interception. Cypress is great about API. It's mixing API testing with a little bit of UI. We're doing that with some of our other Cypress tests, which is pretty remarkable how you can actually make sure that, the posts and the gets are working as expected. With Cypress is really cool. Our new director of engineering came from DQ, which developed AxeCore, which is going to be great. Building some of that into our testing is going to be amazing. And, Lighthouse. But I think the other cool thing is modeling our requirements, and, having this traceability will really help us understand when they're creating it, that, full coverage. I'm talking about what we're trying to, strive for. And we're going to continue modeling things. I didn't do all this. These people take all the credit. This is how this has all happened in 6 months. And, 6 months ago, we had zero automation. We had zero people dedicated to this project. The one thing I love about Everfi is they're fully bought into building better quality into their applications and bringing everybody onto this. It's not just quality engineering. It's developers getting in and learning how to do this today. These individuals have helped us move this forward. And the two Curiosity folks, James and George, got in there and helped us train us up and how to use our product. And teaching model-based testing is a different mindset. It's not as easy as your typical thing. And these two really helped us get this going. And we're doing some great things. And I'm hoping you all really enjoyed this conversation. I know it's like almost a lightning talk about all the cool things we're doing, but thank you. Have a great day. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. Hi, Gil.
Hey, Greg. How are you?
Doing?
I've seen the comments. Maybe you have some of them. People are mind blown. I'm used to this. I mean, I've seen your other talks, but people are totally mind blown. Lots of good questions. So, ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
So, how do you know that the generation gives you the coverage and the test that you need?
Oh, repeat that again. Sorry.
How do you know that the generation of the test gives you the coverage and the tests that you need?
That's a great question. So as you saw in the presentation, you had that visual flowchart. So it's an actual flowchart that you're kind of putting together to understand the flow that you're actually walking through from an actual user flow. And as you saw at the end, we're going to start adding some of these other layers in there. Like we're already adding a visual check for every click into our application. So you all know in that visual flowchart the actual coverage you're actually getting from page to page. So it gives you that visualization compared to other automation. You don't really have that visualization around what you're actually testing.
Right. Do you use any coverage to make sure that you're doing like full coverage?
We don't have any full coverage right now. I know Cypress right now is working on some co-coverage stuff that we'd like to kind of add in there in the future. And I know we have co-coverage in most of our lower level testing stuff. We don't have anything from the UI level at this point.
Great, thanks. Okay, why did you choose Cypress instead of React testing library or maybe other options?
Yeah, so I saw that question earlier. When you hear me talk about component testing, kind of in modeling those components, what you saw in our courses today is Backbone JS and kind of JavaScript. So it's not React, and so that particular application is a little different. We do have some React components in our system also. So there is a little difference there. Cypress for me was, I think I saw some comments. I like the new shiny toy, and I love the speed of it, and I love how we can really dive in and do so many different things with the mixing UI and API testing. And it was really fast to get up and running. And their documentation is great because I'm also, when I joined Everfi, I was training manual testers to do automation, and having great documentation like Cypress has out there on their site allows people to get up to speed faster.
Yep, great, thanks. Okay, Mike Milgate, longtime follower, first time question. You have been talking about model-based testing for a couple of years now. How is the engagement level of business, dev, QA, etc.?
So the amazing thing you saw, probably almost the second to last slide, half the developers are actually writing model-based testing, and they've been highly involved. They've actually understood some of the pain that's being inflicted down to the QA team itself. And so they've been helping us innovate ways to make our testing more robust. They're fully bought in the sense of to write better tests and get away from this world of manual testing and everything. So from the dev to QA, it's been a great collaboration. I think it's up to about 10 people right now doing automation on the course automation side. And so that's been a great experience from that side of it. And also with this whole movement about model-based testing is giving a lot of people the visualization and the one-to-one relationship. It's allowing us to actually, make, update tests much faster, generate those tests much faster. We started this project January 6th. So roughly 6 months in, and we're predicting we'll have 28 tests, kind of generated. Right. So that's remarkable for the numbers we're doing and the amount of code we're generating on a daily basis.
Great, thanks. Richard is asking, where and how is test data managed in this process?
Ooh, that's a good question. So there's two layers of how we do things, especially for the course side. When we build a course, it'll automatically get generated into an S3 bucket, and it's kind of like a mock-up static site of the actual course itself. So the data is very static there. Anytime a developer is making a change on a course or a component, it's testing against that component itself only, or then going to be tested on the course itself. And then after that, that course is actually created and then deployed out to our actual platforms. As of today, it's kind of been a little painful because we're only 6 months in, but what we got in flight right now is, building some, things around restoring databases. We've took some snapshots, and then what we're doing is we're destroying it. We're using AWS and Docker and everything. We're going to destroy the environment, restore it back up, and restore those databases to get back to that known state before we run automation again. We've got that first phase kind of done around doing that with some of our API testing already. And then that next phase is just building some other APIs that allows us to reset some actual, statuses of a user taking a course, taking the actual course itself to get us in that state. And then that third piece we're actually working on, one of my engineers are working on data generation, where it's scanning the databases and trying to get the actual system into a known state. And so that's one of our other initiatives I didn't talk about here today to allow us to even scale this even faster.
Okay, so not perfect. Still have some work to do, right?
Yeah, 6 months in, like you can see it's a work in progress. I think, it's a journey. Remember, it's not a destination. We're going to continue building this ship as we go along.
And it never ends.
No.
And thank everybody for that. Okay, where does test generation leave TDD?
I think, where does it leave it? I actually think test generation and TDD can work out really nicely, because I'm just going to take a couple of examples. If you know that you're going to be updating creating a new component, right? Say we have a new course component we can actually model that out by creating code. It's the same as TDD. Our models are code. And then from there, you could build out that flow chart. And then when it comes out of the developer's hands, we can just go run our API, our API command to basically generate those tests and ensure, is doing what is expected, right? So we can still do TDD. It's just a different approach of doing the way we're doing it today, but absolutely, I hope we can get to the TDD level someday.
Great. Can you explain a bit more on how the tests are generated from the models? A simple example.
Yeah. So think about, I'm going to give you a good example. We're going to take a component. We've modeled it, right? And then I have a course, like you saw that flowchart. The way Test Modeler works today is if I wanted to take a carousel, I go into their platform. It's a UI-based platform. And I would literally say, I want to grab the accordion. I drag it into the flow chart. Then I can draw an arrow to the next thing it needs to do. So maybe the next thing is to click a next button. So then I drag in the next button. And then that basically would be kind of our test. And we go generate it. So what it does is it will generate that test with accordion and then the next button itself. And so that flow chart is kind of like how we're actually doing that. And then when we do the generation piece, we're talking to their algorithms, and they know actually how to communicate to the code template of how to fill out that code template that kind of demonstrated during the presentation. A lot faster than the way we used to do it.
And you built that visual editor yourselves?
That visual editor comes from Test Modeler itself. Test Modeler is a company that has been doing model-based testing for a long time from the UK. And I've talked to them through the years when I worked at GetNet, and my team did an amazing job building a tool called Simulato, which generates Selenium tests. And the way we were model-based testing there was basically they was telling the models how to generate itself, and we was building our own algorithms there. That's a lot longer process. It used to take us days to kind of put that together. Maybe less than days, but this here, it takes seconds in a sense when you got everything kind of put up there.
Okay, next question. Using that method with all the module permutations, how to avoid unmanageable quantities of these cases that we all need to be manually approved on component changes? Good question.
So we verify our components by testing the components in isolation already. So that helps us really quickly. The second piece of that also is we have UX designers. They're in Applet Tools, and they're scanning and looking at visual assertions. We have product owners and developers. So we use their interactive tooling in Applet Tools to kind of say, hey, is this expected change? One of the things we're trying to establish is as we run these, we're sending the results over. So that having the UX designers and the product owners going into Applet Tools or even into the results and saying, okay, is this the actual source of truth for this new change? Is it what was expected, or maybe it wasn't? Maybe we need to create a bug and stuff. So that's kind of how we're managing it. You start thinking about all the permutations. It's a lot of data to think about, right? I guess, ask me in 6 more months when we got, thousands and thousands of tests running, right? And how is that really going? I hope with the one thing, my mentality is everybody owns quality. So I'm trying to get everybody involved with this whole process, and they're getting involved with it. And I think that's helping us try to get through the results faster.
Great, thanks. How often do you get on that bike in the background, Greg?
4 to 5 times a week, 20-minute sessions. So I get quite often. Ask me maybe in a year how often I get it. It's a fairly new thing. It's only 2 months old. So, good question.
It's a work in progress. It's a journey.
It's a work in progress, right?
Yep. Hi, Greg. This is awesome. I am curious if you're able to share the detailed auto test generator.
Like, what kind of details do you think they want, Gil? Like
source code?
Like actual course code itself? Yeah.
Source
so, I
code.
mean, the course code's pretty simple. If I was able to go back and kind of show you the course code and stuff, like when you think about that, when you're going through our courses, and maybe you have, I know maybe you haven't went through our courses, right? So you'll get to a particular page, and there's might be 3 or 4 components on each page, right? And so what we're trying to do is model each of those components out. And then with the generation pieces, we're just taking that basic Cypress code and then basically putting it into an actual test artifact test script, right? And that's what we're trying to generate. You got the carousel. Carousel could have 5 to 10 pages, right? There could be a next button. There could be a video. We're trying to walk through that, and that's kind of how it works. And without giving you a visual, maybe if I was able to get back to some of my examples, that would really help.
Okay. Last question.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding automation engineers working on the model, do you have other QA members working on manual testing while development of the model is in progress? Maybe a broader question would be, what is the role of manual QA in this kind of an environment?
That's a good question. So I typically call those quality advocates. I do have quality advocates on my team. My team's roughly about 24 people right now. I would say 90% of them are actually, engineers, and, maybe the other piece is quality advocates, and they're getting in there and making sure they're looking at the bigger picture of things, making sure components are working, looking at accessibility, scheduling accessibility testing, that we do some stuff outsourced because there's a lot there. They also use service for extra, we do crowdsource testing with our courses and other various parts of our application too, around, exploratory testing. So they definitely play a big piece of it. And they've learned how to do automation also. So they understand how to look at the results. They know how to execute them and everything. And they work really closely with the devs to make sure that when we're building something brand new, that it can basically be developed for automation as we go along this whole journey.
Thank you, Greg, for a mind-blowing talk. And good luck on your journey, both on the bike and Everfi.
Thanks, Gil. You have a great day.